Wicker Street, and I wasn't alone. I came to Wicker Street because stories had a way of finding pockets of rent I could afford. The room on the second floor was a bargain. 2 thin windows that faced an alley, a squeaking radiator, and a mirror that sat crooked against the wall, as if leaning away from itself. On my third night, I found a brass key tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It was heavy in my palm and oddly warm, as though it remembered someone else's fingers. Mrs. Elsie was the kind of landlady who apologized for the building rather than the tenants. She brought me tea in a chipped cup and kept conversations to the weather and the condition of the pipes. When I mentioned the key, she dimmed, as if a light had passed through her. She said it might belong to the old tenants, and shrugged in the way people shrug toward small mysteries, the kind you placate rather than solve. That night, I set the key on my nightstand beside a recorder I used to take notes. The recorder felt absurdly formal in the warm night, my small ritual against forgetfulness. Outside, the city hummed low. Inside, the radiator popped like someone moving furniture. Halfway through a cup of coffee, I heard a single step on the floor above me. Then another 7 beats later, a soft scrape against my window frame. The timing felt deliberate, like a metronome someone meant for me to hear. I told myself the sounds were ordinary pipes, a misaligned board, tired tenants. But ordinary things stopped explaining the small displacements. A chair nudged a hair's breadth from a wall. A page of my notebook lay face down in the morning when I was certain I had left it open. The mirror reflected the room, yet sometimes it answered with an angle that didn't belong. Once, in its glass, a shoulder moved where my shoulders did not, slow and patient as a shadow learning a new posture. Days blurred into each other under the thin winter light. I recorded my observations out of habit at first, then out of a need to prove what the room had begun to require, that someone else existed in the margins. The recordings caught nothing in the way a photograph might, silences and spaces. But when I slowed them, a breath, elongated and not mine, sat between my spoken sentences. It felt like punctuation added by an invisible hand. One afternoon, under the low light, I found an envelope tucked under the mattress. It was yellowed and sealed, the edges soft from time. On the front, someone had written, in a hand that tilted like a tired plant, "Do not open." The command felt less prohibition than pleading. I did not open it at once. Instead, I carried it with me like a secret between the mattress springs and my palms, half tempted to pry and half wanting to see how long silence could be kept intact. Nights grew more particular. The steps above acquired a rhythm that felt like a name being spelled out in feet. Pause. 2 quick steps. Long pause. I tried matching the pattern tap. 2 taps. Wait. But the mimicry changed nothing except my own breath, now quick and keen. Once, I woke to the sound of paper being smoothed, and in the gray wash before dawn, caught the curtain move, though there was no draft. The room was starting to hold its breath with me. I set a camera on the shelf facing the mirror and left it to catch whatever the room offered when I slept. Reviewing the footage made my skin feel foreign to me. For hours the room sat as it always had. Then the mirror's reflection shifted, a subtle slippage of angle. And in that slippage, something briefly occupied space behind my reflection, as if someone leaned against an unseen wall. The movement was measured, careful, and when I rewound the frame, the shadow seemed to hesitate, as though deciding whether to be seen. I considered leaving and found myself bargaining with reasons to stay. The job interviews, the story of a city that rearranges itself for those who listen, the stubborn proof of my own bravery. Each reason nested beside a fear I named about midnight, that the room didn't want me to leave because it had nowhere else to send its attentions. When I voiced the thought aloud, for the first time there was an answer. The radiator clicked once, almost like a consonant, as if the building itself cleared its throat. On a night when the rain smudged the street lamps and the alley smelled of wet paper, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single line of handwriting, not alone, no other explanation, no signature. My chest pressed against the silence, which stretched and then folded into movement. The mirror fogged as though someone had exhaled close to its glass, and letters, small, deliberate, formed on the damp surface, not written by any hand I could see. I pressed my palm to the mirror where the letters gathered, feeling condensation and something colder under it, like the memory of cold fingers. The shape in the reflection did not try to be human, but hinted at a posture. Patient, patient as a thing that had learned to wait through years of tenants and nights. I whispered questions, more to mark time than in hope, and the reply came as a pattern of knocks from the ceiling. 3 soft taps, once, twice, 3 times, like a counting that belonged to neither of us, yet catalogued us both. The next morning I packed a bag and stood in the doorway, the key heavy in my pocket, the envelope folded into my jacket. Mrs. Elsie hovered in the hall with an expression that slipped between apology and relief. She said, "Some rooms keep company better than others," and in that voice was a history I could not parse. I left the key on the sill, expecting the building to accept it back. The brass warmed under someone else's thumb, then cooled, and the radiator clicked the way someone inside might settle to sleep. Weeks later, I replayed my recorder at odd hours and listened to the spaces between sounds. Sometimes the breaths were missing. Sometimes the rhythm of steps returned in patterns that matched no floor plan. When the city felt unbearably loud, I would sit with the recording and hear, in the hush between my words, a small, steady guffaw of air, like a person learning to exhale after forgetting how. The last file ends with my voice trailing, and then, for a fraction of a second, a whisper I do not recognize saying, "Stayed." I never returned to that room. Yet sometimes, walking past Wicker Street, I catch the shape of a light in that second-floor window and feel the key's warmth bloom in my palm, as if memory were a small, live thing. The mirror's answers stayed where they were open, patient, and without malice. It taught me that presence can be a property, a tenancy that refuses to vacate, and that some places keep company with stories long after the storyteller leaves. The last truth is a private one. I wasn't entirely alone, and perhaps I never had been.